Legislation, policy, and service was about trying to get at what's happening at the systemic level and understanding that, all types of violence are prohibited by law means that, you're focusing more on the other two pieces, policy and service. And the fact is that this identified gap was in service and that we wanted to understand why. And so, of course, going to Quebec, Ontario, and BC as three provinces that have huge population bases, and then Ontario in the middle of that, because Ontario's a province that had 10 years of accessibility legislation. And we had hoped, and one would think, that with 10 years of accessibility legislation, you would have something more to show. There would have been something different. And I was going to say, it's like, this is the cliffhanger. It's like, was there or wasn't there? And it's like, I'm going to tell you that the truth is there wasn't. There wasn't any meaningful difference in Ontario. And really what we found was this enormous gap that's starting at a policy level. And it's in reviewing the policies of those three provinces and the federal policy, what we saw was it's not a gap, but it's an abyss. There's no meaningful policy discourse around women with disabilities. When women with disabilities are mentioned somewhere at the high level in policy, whether it's, again, provincial or federal, it's acknowledged that we have the highest rates of violence. And then this terrible thing happens, which is that we get footnoted to the bottom of that policy paper and then nothing happens. Or even worse, what we found over and over and over again was women being ungendered in this really so overt way, where we would have lists of women, refugee women, Indigenous women, racialized women, LGBTQ women, and people with disabilities. Not women, people with disabilities. And this is something that was evidenced in policy, and it's actually become, out of LPS, I think really what we ended up doing was in December of 2017, we launched in Ottawa at a policy forum, More Than a Footnote, as a campaign. We had already done it in British Columbia through the provincial research that we did there on the legislation, policy, and service project. Then we launched a national conversation that has morphed into, I think, something that becomes an ongoing and compelling platform Dawn Canada needs to hold up to put this out, not just to policy people, because as it turns out, we've had numerous occasions to use the More Than a Footnote platform to point to how this is happening at every level. In March 2018, the Department of Justice released a report, and that report was based on the 2014 general GSS, the survey everyone does with the violent victimization subset data. And incredibly, not to us, but incredibly, I think in terms of the data, what it showed was that nearly half of all violent victimization in Canada is happening to a woman with a disability. Violent victimization is defined as physical assault, sexual assault, and robbery. And so there you are, and this report is a focus on violence against women with disabilities. And there we are in front of the media right after this report comes out with a headline that says, people with disabilities instead of women, even though the report is focused on women. We're so not present, and we're so absent as to be footnoted, as to be ungendered. And so understanding that More Than a Footnote is a way to engage policymakers, service providers, the violence against women sector, and everyone in a conversation about something that has to stop, which is this idea that women with disabilities cannot be footnoted because we represent fully 1/4 of all women in this country, but are virtually being ignored in every area of our lives.